speculative fiction is what we would deem as a super genre. So it covers several genre types, which include science fiction, fantasy, dystopian fiction, weird tales, horror, and even alternate history. So these are some of the genre types. Mainly speculative fiction, the word speculative, it speculates, it raises the question of what if, okay? What if there's an earthquake and the earthquake is actually caused by a mythical beast, say, in the case of like Japan, Godzilla, okay? Or say you discover one day that your neighbors are actually aswang or vampires, okay? So it raises that kind of what if, okay? What if the future is one desolate wasteland? How do we survive? And how does humanity cope? Could there be the possibility of humanity reinventing itself or themselves? So speculative fiction dwells on what we would deem as conjectures, suppositions, and in a sense, nonetheless, even if the form of speculative fiction may be fantasy or horror, the unreal or the supernatural, but nonetheless, the grounding of speculative fiction is on reality because we are still interested in the problems and the issues of what make us human beings. Filipino-Chinese writers and readers are interested in speculative fiction. And for those writers who are Filipino of Chinese descent, I think speculative fiction is a kind of language for them to express certain issues related to identity, issues related to society, and perhaps even issues related to humanity. Well, of course, we know that speculative fiction is a 21st century global trend. And I think that also perks our interests, okay, in something that we can experiment with, in something that we can, in other words, use as a venue to express our creativity, our imagination. But to be specific to the Filipino-Chinese writers, we can say also that this is a kind of venue where you can also be radical in some way, like you can question your identities. You can question, say, traditional rigid structures that reside in the Filipino-Chinese community, okay? For instance, I think we know that even within the Filipino-Chinese families, the parents would have what we deem as kaishao, or they would introduce you to a possible spouse. There will be a matchmaker, okay? So this is part of that kind of a tradition wherein the parents choose your spouse, husband or wife, for you. But of course, for the 21st century young people, okay, we like to be more independent. We like to choose the people that we love in that sense. So you can see this kind of issue, say, projected in one of the stories like Erin Chupecos, okay, Howe, no? So wherein she writes about the sister having these all sorts of boyfriends, okay, and the father insistent that it be somebody Chinese, and the boyfriends are all these very strange, non-human creatures, okay, like the Minotaur, okay, the zombie, okay, vampire or whatever else, no? Of course, this is a way to poke fun at tradition, and this is also a way of like asserting the identitarian difference. I'm different, and I want to be different with my own identity. And my identity, in a sense, is not fixed, but it's multiple. Okay, it has undergone multiple influences, transformation. Some of us may call it hybrid, okay, or some of us may say that it is of multicultural tradition. I think these are some of the things that the Filipino-Chinese writers, okay, who do speculative fiction, they are interested in such things. The Philippine-Chinese speculative fiction has this kind of a consciousness that it has to debunk stereotypes. And some of the stereotypes are tied to the notion of what makes a Philippine-Chinese community, or rather a Filipino-Chinese community. There's always this perception that the Filipino-Chinese community is one, okay? And it's like a homogeneous entity, something like that. However, because of the changes, say, in the world, okay, in this age of globalization, okay, multiculturalism, okay, and more of politically correct awareness, the Filipino-Chinese writers are consciously questioning that kind of a perception of the oneness of the Filipino-Chinese community. The point here is not really to kind of like debunk or fight against the community, but to show the community in a more hybrid, you could say, in a more expansive perspective. For instance, okay, you can say that in certain stories, okay, that show the Filipino-Chinese community, we see some kind of generational conflicts. Okay, the father and the mother still clinging, or even the grandmother still clinging to certain traditions. Okay, to certain clannish beliefs or ideology, and then the younger generation shouldering the burden, wanting to have some kind of filial piety for the past, but nonetheless, okay, the burden of carrying the traditional beliefs, okay, the traditional practices, in other words, might not be applicable to the current concern or the contemporary concern. One example would be Kenneth Yu's The Cricket, okay, wherein the youngest son, okay, seems to be shouldering the burden, okay, of practicing the same traditional obligations that he had to fulfill, and it was like, you're the youngest son, you have to do everything in that sense. This is not just for the family, but also for the clan, and of course for the community. And the cricket is crafted like a gothic story. So the gothicness, the horror aspects, is actually a projection of the anxieties and fears of these young person. So, well, it didn't, in a sense, end happily, okay, because it's a gothic or a horror, but in a sense, it's an expression of what the story, in other words, want to say or want to assert about the Filipino-Chinese community. Okay, so how do the Filipino-Chinese writers, in a sense, contribute to the enhancement of the bilateral relations between the Philippines and China? Okay, this doesn't just apply to the Filipino-Chinese writers, but also to writers in general, and also to literature in general. Literature as one of the arts, okay, contributes to what we deem as the enhancement of empathy, understanding, emotional connections between people. And I think even in the political realm, we need this kind of we need this kind of abilities, the ability to empathize with people from another culture, the ability to recognize their difference, and at the same time also acknowledge that differences should not divide us, but difference should, in other words, give us an opportunity to have understanding of the specificity and the uniqueness of another culture so that we can form better relations. Okay, and also an important thing even in this age is there should be a relationship that is grounded on emotional understanding. Okay, so that kind of an emotional connection, we see this a lot in literature. Okay, even in speculative fiction, where you have all these characters, where you have characters experiencing conflicts, where you have characters trying to grapple with the influences of various cultures, including Filipino and Chinese, and therefore, literature is a way of expressing and underscoring the differences, the uniqueness of cultures, and at the same time, because of this kind of expression, encourages empathy, understanding, and emotional connection. These are, I think, very important.